Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of IndyCar on the 21st of August, and it is actually the 21st of August today, not as I said yesterday, sorry. Okay, today, well, it's Girls' Day today, isn't it? This oddly named annual comedy festival known as Girls, which I sort of recently retermed as meaning something along the lines of grossly exaggerated, ridiculous shite, because that's basically what this is. As we all know, the so-called General Expenditure and Revenue Scotland figures were invented by Sir Ian Lang, who was the Secretary of State for Scotland many years ago in his job, and he stated this at the time when he created the GERS figures, was to create a set of suppositions, guesses and fabrications that would basically show the Scots that they couldn't possibly be independent because they would have to take on a whole lot of British debt, which they hadn't borrowed. And this continues to this day. This annual jamboree, this, I feel like this kind of yearly fun festival that is ridiculous figures coming from the United Kingdom, goes on every year. This year probably has to be even funnier than most of the comedy acts at the Edinburgh Festival. Now I say it's funny because none of the figures being alleged in these so-called GERS figures make any kind of sense whatsoever. For example, we're asked to believe that in the space of the last month, Scotland has forced the United Kingdom to borrow 55% of its annual borrowing. Now, we used to be blamed for 10% of the UK's borrowing. In other words, the UK was saying 10% of everything we borrow is your fault because you're Scots. Now they're saying 55% of the entire UK deficit is Scotland's fault. It's all your fault. In a month, you forced us to increase our borrowing by 40%. What a load of utter bollocks this is. Anyone with a modicum of sense can see that these figures are pure fantasy. They've been invented. Not only that, but they're also blaming Wales for 55% of the UK's borrowing as well. So if you add those two together, you've got 110% of the UK's deficit being blamed on Scotland and Wales. It's utterly preposterous. It is hilarious. The kind of crap that they will come out with to try and convince us, mysteriously come out with this data just before we're about to have an independence referendum. Well, it's not a coincidence, is it? You can't possibly become independent because you're responsible for half the UK debt, and so is Wales, which is strangely enough starting to think about independence as well. It's not a coincidence that this is all happening now, and for anybody to say that the GERS figures are actually created by the Scottish Government is another pack of lies. It is not by the Scottish Government. The statistics compiled supposedly on behalf of the Scottish Government are being compiled by appointed people who are appointed and placed there by the British Government to create these figures so that the Scottish Government is forced to accept this nonsense as some kind of fact, when it is actually just based on a series of guesses, surveys, estimates, and quite frankly just plain fantasising in this particular instant. If you read Wings Over Scotland at all, have a look at it today. If you read any of the other major non-UK newspapers today, have a look at the columns in that and look at what these GERS figures are actually saying, because the sudden steep climb in debt which is being blamed on Scotland is laughable. Frankly, it's ridiculous. I have just listened on Radio 4 to an entire 20-minute item which says that in England families are living in shipping containers because they will not spend money building houses and social housing to house these poor people who have basically been chucked out of that they were in before and forced to move into converted freight containers. And this is supposedly a temporary arrangement by a country which claims to have the 5th largest economy in the world and so strong and stable that it's wonderful and brilliant and great. And yet the BBC is just saying there today that over 300,000 children are homeless in England. 300,000 children, 250,000 families in England are homeless, live in these ridiculous tin huts. Now, for the British government to say that Scotland is somehow a burden on them is preposterous. We are not the ones who are forcing people to live in converted shipping containers. Scotland has not borrowed money. It's not allowed to borrow money. Remember, the British government doesn't permit Scotland to borrow money. So the British government borrows money to waste on its stupid high-speed 2 rail line, which we're told today they're now thinking of reviewing. In other words, this is code for we're going to stop it because it's costing a fortune and we can't afford it. That's where the borrowing has gone. It's not gone to Scotland. We haven't spent a penny of it. It's all down to what England is wasting on its ridiculous Brexit. It's already spent, what is it, £7 billion or something like that on Brexit, just to get ready for a no-deal Brexit. So they cannot claim that they're borrowing on behalf of the Scots. The Scots have never asked for any money to be borrowed on our behalf. And not only that, they don't need to borrow money on our behalf. They've already taken almost half of all of our revenues off us anyway. So they've got billions and billions of pounds of Scottish tax revenues that they could easily pay down their debt with because they don't give us it back. We give them, what is it? We make about £60 billion a year. We get back less than half of that. We're getting back around about 30 billion, maybe less. But the bulk of that money that we give them, we never see it again. So it's laughable for them to claim that we owe them money. And if we did owe them that amount of money, and we were responsible for such a huge debt, why would they be so desperate for us not to leave the UK? The two things do not add up. You see the dissonance there? We're so useless and we're so hopeless and we can't live without England. We're such a burden on them that they are prepared to throw us under the bus for Brexit, and yet they won't let go of Scotland. Why not? And it's because we are not a burden. We've never been a burden. We operate at a profit every year, and we have done so for at least the last 30 years. We are the only country in the United Kingdom which runs at a profit. Nobody in Scotland is responsible for a single penny of British debt, and never have been. So it's important that everybody who reads the press today ignore the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, the Telegraph, even the Guardian. Don't read these English papers, because everything that they are saying is based on invented figures that they have made up to prevent you from thinking that Scotland can become independent. Again, the same trick they used in 2014. This time, it's so ridiculous, it's transparently a lie. And it doesn't take anybody with a mathematical brain to work out that Scotland has not suddenly become such a burden in the last month that it's forced the United Kingdom to spend half of its borrowing on Scotland. It just has happened. Other stories today. We learned that Hunterston Power Station, the one with the 400 cracks in the core, is to be allowed to restart that reactor. Now that reactor is now run by EDF, the French National Nuclear Power Company. French, right? And that company has been told by the British nuclear regulator that the nuclear regulator is going to change the rules so that this 400 crack limit that they put on a reactor being safe is now going to be binned. So that means that they can run this unsafe reactor with these hundreds of cracks in it, on the basis that it will help EDF to squeeze out a few more £1 million worth of electricity and run the risk of a giant explosion trashing most of the west coast of Scotland with nuclear fallout. But don't worry, it's all right, because the British nuclear watchdog says it's okay. They've completely changed their opinion about the maximum number of that are allowed to be in a reactor while it's running, in order that this company can make a bit more money. So there goes your safety, there goes all of the nuclear safeguards being rewritten, torn up and rewritten, so that this company can make a few more bucks. And guess who controls the nuclear authorities in Scotland? Is it Scotland? No. It's the United Kingdom. They are the only ones who can actually change the rules in atomic power. We have no power to do that. If there is a giant accident and it spews radioactive clouds all over the countryside, then the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency can step in and shut it down. But after that, it would be too late. And this is what Scotland has become. It's a dumping ground. It's a place where everyone is expendable so that other people can make money at our expense, and for the British government to blame us for 55% of English debts. That is the reality of Gers and the reality of what is happening with the nuclear industry as well. However, there is some good news today, and the good news is that the Scottish Government and Scottish companies are setting up a new ferry service. Now, it's not just a ferry service, this will also be a freight service. Opening up Rosyth Docks is a major import and export port for Scotland, running regular services at least once a day from the Scottish mainland to the Netherlands. This will enable Scotland to use existing ferries which already run the routes across the North Sea, but to use them mainly to carry freight, but also to carry passengers and tourists to and from the Scottish capital. So you could go directly from Europe all the way across to Rosyth and straight into Edinburgh as a tourist. Or you can bring your truckloads of European produce into Scotland directly, bypassing Calais completely, straight to whoever your customer is in Scotland. And Scottish exporters such as the forestry industry and the whisky industry can export their whisky directly from a Scottish port straight across to a major European hub. Now, this is a very important development, and it shows that both the Scottish Government and Scottish companies are thinking ahead about what happens post-Brexit and post-independence. We need to have a lot of freight hubs, and we need to have a lot of eastern ports open for business so that we can trade directly across the North Sea with mainland Europe, as we used to do before the Union started and before all of Scotland's ports were effectively mothballed except for one or two, and the rest bought up by English companies and basically allowed to decay. So there are good news stories coming, but at the moment we're under an onslaught of English fantasy figures to try and convince us not to vote for independence, when we know that it is the only thing that will save the country from the Brexit catastrophe which Boris Johnson is orchestrating right at this moment as he goes to visit Angela Merkel in Germany. He is going to say, take this backstop away, it's undemocratic. This undemocratic backstop, incidentally, was what was negotiated by Theresa May. She agreed it with the Europeans. That was agreed by the British government. It was an international treaty that the British government signed with the European Union. The only problem with it was that this backstop created a problem for the Tories, who don't really want to have to deal with Northern Ireland's problems, and they don't care about Northern Ireland's problems. They just want England out of the EU. And if there's a war in Northern Ireland, well, that's not their problem because it's happening somewhere far away from London. As usual, Scotland, Wales and Ireland are basically being sacrificed for British exceptionalism, or in this case English exceptionalism as it is now. And we're being asked basically to bite the bullet and put up with having our entire countries trashed, wars started, and being forced to accept the blame for the massive amount of borrowing that the English government is undertaking to pay for their train set, which is going to cost, what is it, £96 billion or more than twice the original estimate. In the meantime, Scotland and its government and its businesses are looking ahead and thinking about trading with Europe directly, bypassing the UK, England, Calais, Dover and all of these seaports, which have taken all of Scotland's exports up until now, claimed them as their own. Now we will have an export hub at Rosyth. We'll also have an import-export harbour at Grangemouth as well, which is still open and running. But we know there are problems coming for the petrochemicals industry because of Brexit as well. All sorts of trouble is coming our way, and we have to get out of Britain, otherwise Scotland is finished as a country. It will be wrecked. It's as simple as that. The British government is already lining up to blame Scotland for all its woes, and we know, anybody who has a modicum of intelligence can see that the United Kingdom is lying about the Gers figures. And that's really all I have to say today. The Gers figures, ignore them. They are nonsense. Do not listen. The Unionist press is claiming that Nicola Sturgeon should be there for the unveiling of these figures. But she is there. She's in Scotland. She's in Shetland, which has television, radio, newspapers, it has the internet, it has mobile phones. She knows about the girls' figures. She doesn't need to be in Edinburgh to witness the publication of a pack of lies. She can listen to the publication of a pack of lies anywhere in Scotland. So all rubbish, as usual. And basically that's it. That's all I have to say on the matter. Tomorrow, the girls' figures are going to be tomorrow's chip wrappers. And really, that's all they deserve to be. In fact, that's all they're really worth, is chip wrappers. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.